All right, guys, here we go. Welcome to your first conceptual photo shoot. So you are going to be doing the stacked assignment. If you follow along with me here on my iPad, I'll show you what we got going on. Learning goal, learn to develop story through creating creative stacked photos. So the idea here is that you can create a story, an idea, inside the umbrella of you stacked objects. Realistically, this is just a still life photo shoot. There are three major kind of photo shoots. There's a still life, which is photographing objects. There's portraiture, which is photographing people, and then there's landscape. And you could throw in product photography, but that's really still life. So those are the three major things. So we're gonna be doing all sorts of variants of that this year. Currently, you're gonna be doing a still life called stacked. And the idea is, can you get a photo so interesting you've created a story inside your photo shoot? Success criteria: student can capture a subject or scene from multiple angles in effort to create the best photo. That means you're successful. So if you were able to stack your objects and the objects were interesting, your stack was interesting, your background was interesting, your lighting was interesting, and then you can move your camera around in a way where the imagery is interesting, that's how we're gonna get an A. I'm also going to be grading your content and not just completion of these assignments. So now the assignments are gonna get a little more challenging in the grading. That's why there's a rubric attached to this. To-dos, what I need you to do. Stack still life. Let me get a different color. Red's a bad idea. So, we don't need to worry about this too. Oh, geez, that's a bad line. You don't need to, let me just move my iPad here. You don't need to worry about the 35 shots and one print. That's if we were in person. I'll address that later in the handout. Okay, you need to make 6 different stacked still lifes, place them in a space and photograph them. This is an example here of a stacked still life. So 6 different stacked still lifes. That means 6 different set of stacks. Okay, if you photographed rocks for one, you can't photograph those same rocks for your next stack. All right. Preferably smaller than 12 inches tall. Now, if you want to stack chairs, that works. Good luck making that interesting. Small stacks, small objects, and getting the camera close actually becomes more interesting for this assignment. Objects must relate to each other. Okay, objects or pairs. Don't just grab random stuff and stack them. They should relate to each other as either if you had Lego characters and they had items, or if you had cooking things, they weren't all the same thing, but they're all things found in the kitchen, so they should be related somehow. Advanced. This is how you get an advanced. Object is interesting and works conceptually with the background. So if the object, let's say you stack cooking tools, but you photograph them in your backyard, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if you take cooking tools and you photograph them in your kitchen, that stack makes sense with the objects and the background. That's advanced, okay? There are 3 rules of composition present. So rules of composition were rule of thirds, balancing elements, right? The very first thing we did in class, different ways to organize leading lines, things like that. If there are 4 of the composition elements present, that's gonna get you an A. If there are 3 of them present, so for example, leading lines, rule of thirds, and balancing elements, that's gonna be a B for that section, okay? Correct exposure for all the shots. You guys are using cell phones, so it should be pretty easy to get the correct exposure. They do a lot of thinking for you. Your space, this is letter E here. Your space or scene was made more engaging and interesting through thoughtful use of the camera to create a focal point. Remember, emphasis was one of our principles of design. Focal point was one of our composition rules. So if you're able to create a focal point by either blurring the background or having an object close and blurring an object in the middle, if your exposure, if you're using the camera creatively to create a focal point, that's gonna get you an A. Okay, G over here, advanced lighting. You don't have to do anything with lighting and that'll get you a B, but if you use intentional lighting, like a window to the side or a light like I did, or a flashlight would work. If you play with lighting, a main light source, that's gonna help you get an advanced, okay? So lighting, advanced. Lighting places emphasis on the object. So if you had a dark room and a flashlight pointing to one of your objects, right? So if I had these 3 things here stacked up, right? and I have a flashlight and it's on here and the background's dark in my room, that's going to help you get an A on this assignment. H, lighting is unique and so is the depth of field. So if you're able to limit your focus, so just your objects are in focus by tapping on them on your phone or using that app called Focus that we talked about yesterday, that and really interesting lighting, those can help you get an A. If you just stack objects and photograph them, you could still get a pretty good B if they're good objects. Okay, so those are, that's the rubric for this. Okay, I'll show you some examples here in a second. Every piece of your photo needs to be intentional. Do not have lazy backgrounds. Here are some examples, some really interesting examples. This is crazy. I don't know how they stacked those coins on top of a spoon. My guess is they're lying to us. However, people are creative, people are interesting. There's a very real possibility this person stacked coins on a spoon. Maybe they glued them together, I don't know. This here, this stack of pennies, this absolutely works and that can get you an A. It's got a nice background, it's nice and blurry, and it's got a very interesting stack of objects. You notice there's enough objects that they're kind of tilting a little bit. That tension makes it interesting. If I just stacked 5 pennies, that's not a very good photo. If I just stack Legos because they're supposed to be snapped together, it doesn't create that tension. So make sure your objects have tension, and that's going to make them more interesting. Now, both these rock photos are great. This one here, they're playing with the background a little more intentionally by making the sun rest on that final stone. While this bottom one here, the background matches the foreground. Notice there's a little bit of green here, there's greens back here, there's yellows throughout, and it's blurry. So those environments work really well. One is advanced and one is proficient, okay? This one here with the sun is advanced. This one back here is proficient. Okay, tough for that green. So that's your guys' goal. I'm gonna show you a demonstration right now. Good luck. All right, guys. First assignment with a demo and a concept. This assignment is called Stacked. The goal of this assignment is a couple different things. I want you to learn how to set up photos, and I want you to learn how to find photos. A setup means you're going to get objects and set them up to get the achieved photo. A found photo would be you walked around your environment and found photos. 2 examples of that real quick. Stacked objects. These are just been stacked in my classroom. Okay, filing cabinet is kind of a stacked object. The cabinets are stacked. I've got this stack of mouse pads, not a very good stacked photo. I've got stacks of paper right over there. Those are all things that are naturally stacked in my environment. A better way to do photography is to do what we call a setup. So the setups I currently have, I have one on the floor down here. We'll get to that in a second. But here's some more setups I have right over here. Okay? A setup is you get the objects that you want to photograph and you make the photograph happen. So we're going to have 2 kinds of photos today. We're going to have setup photos and we're going to have found photos. All right, there's a couple things you're going to need for this to work. You're going to need objects to photograph. I've got these bags of stuff in my classroom. I used to teach jewelry, so I happen to have all these stones right here. We're gonna stack some stones. I've already done it over there if you can see. I happen to find all these marbles. Probably got them from the ceramic room, I don't know. Here's some marbles right here. We're gonna stack those up, see if we get there. And then I've got some paint that we're gonna stack up. So first supply you're gonna need is objects to stack. The more interesting the object, the more interesting the photo, if that makes sense. If you just stack plates, we've all seen plates stacked up. If you stack 4 or 5 quarters, that's a little tiny stack. But if you stack 30 quarters, that's kind of interesting. If you stack 30 quarters on top of a dice and kind of make them precarious, now we've got visual tension and now we have a much more interesting photo. So what you stack and how you stack it is going to make the picture just as good as a good photograph. You'll see some examples here in a second. Or maybe you already saw the examples. I don't know where I'm putting this in the video. We're also going to need a background. If you notice here, my background's very boring. I haven't done anything in this room here for months, so I had to clean it all up and things like that. So we're back in school. So I need to make a good background. I'm going to use this old photo I had laying around. I'm going to use this as a background. I'm also going to use the back of it as a background. Things you can use as backgrounds would be shirts, sheets, windows. I think a great place to take a photo would be on a window seal, things like that. So what are you going to use as a background? Should have a background. So we've got objects to stack, we have a background to put in our image, and then we're going to need light. Now I've got a couple different things of light I can use. I have a light bulb right here, I could use that. I have a studio light right over there, that big tall guy, that's a studio light. I also have a window. I have plenty of overhead lights, but if I can control my light, I'm gonna get a much better photo. All right, here are some of the objects we're gonna photograph. We've got a stack of paint. I thought about just stacking them up on top and just make a tower. Not very interesting, so I think having one lay over and having them set up slightly differently could be a better photo. I've got my little stack of stones here. We're gonna change the angles on the photo and see what we can get. And then right over here, this wasn't easy. I've got my stack of marbles. All right guys, so I need to photograph these. So for this first photograph, I'm simply going to put this wall up like this, grab my phone, and I'm gonna get in there and start taking photographs. I'm gonna change the angle a little bit. I'm gonna change my perspective, things like that to get an interesting photo. For this one here, my rock stack, I actually want a little more texture like this, so I'm gonna have this a little further back and I'm gonna photograph right down here and try to make it blurry. Okay, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start photographing just on a time lapse, and so you can kind of see the process I go through. Okay, now, let's see if this works here. Ooh. For these photos over here, I'm gonna have to get my camera really low to the ground. That low composition is gonna make it much more interesting for our viewers. So I'm gonna take my camera, get low to the ground, get close to the objects, and try to make the background blurry. So you're gonna see me go through all these motions here on high speed, starting now.
Hey kids. This is a tasty burger. Burger.
Always clean up your messes. All right, guys, here we go. Now it's your turn to do the work. Find interesting objects, stack them up, get interesting lighting, interesting background, be creative. I am looking for your creativity. If you're feeling bored or tired or like, I'm out of ideas, that's when it really gets tough. So maximize your creativity. Go out and find interesting things to stack. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Good luck. Time for asynchronous.